Hey guys, what's up? I'm Ashley and I am back to talk to you about all things A Song of Ice and Fire. In today's video, I will be jumping back into my Pink Letter Who Dunnit series and I will be presenting to you part 3. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's jump in. Many times I've suggested that when examining who the author of the Pink Letter could be, we should ask ourselves, who stands to gain from John's presence at Winterfell? If we look at those currently gathered at Winterfell, one person immediately jumps out who would benefit immensely from Jon's arrival. That person is Wyman Manderly. Wyman Manderly is Lord of White Harbor and one of House Stark's chief bannermen. 1,000 years before the conquest, the Manderlys were fugitives, driven out of the Reach due to then King Percy Gardner III's fear of the Manderlys' growing power. The Manderlys were exiled, friendless, and their lives were in jeopardy, but House Stark took them in, fed them, and protected them from their enemies. House Stark also granted the Manderlys the land where White Harbor now stands. In exchange, the Manderlys swore they would always be Stark men. So based off this history between houses Stark and Manderly, it's 100% safe to assume that Lord Wyman despises the Boltons for everything they've done, and that he will never support them as Wardens of the North, Lords of Winterfell, Liege Lords, anything of that ilk. But, in addition to this, he also has another reason to want to see the fall of House Bolton. Remember in the first video I mentioned that Ramsay had a wife before and that it would be important later? Ramsay's first wife was Lady Donella Hornwood, but before she was Hornwood, she was Donella Manderly, a cousin of one Wyman Manderly. To gain control of her lands, Ramsay seized her and forced her to marry him that same day, then locked her in a dungeon and forgot about her. Lady Donella starved to death, but not before chewing off her fingers in desperation for food. Now, I don't know about you, but if Lady Donella was my cousin, I would want vengeance and I would stop at nothing to get it. And so it would seem the same is true of Lord Wyman Manderly. So I think it's only appropriate that we take a look at the scheming that he's doing. That way we can really see that writing the Pink Letter would not only be easy as Frey pie for this man, but it actually fits into his plans rather nicely. As it would turn out, Lord Wyman's scheming is quite extensive. First, he imprisoned Davos Seaworth and concocted a scheme to kill him to prove his loyalty to the Freys. But he truly kept Davos alive. Instead, Lord Wyman found a man who resembled Davos and chopped off that guy's head and hands and mounted them above the sea gate. But he didn't stop there. Lord Wyman sent Davos on a secret mission to smuggle Rickon Stark off of Skagos and return him to Lord Wyman's custody. The only way to thwart Roose Bolton, who had Ned's daughter, is to have Ned Stark's son and the son's wolf. Now, in exchange for this successful smugglation, Lord Wyman agreed that he would declare for Stannis. The Freys were also on Lord Wyman's hit list. It is commonly thought that he ordered the murders of Rhaegar, Symond, and Jared Frey and cooked them into pies which he served to their kin at a wedding feast. Now, this Frey trio had been at White Harbor, and as such, they traveled with Lord Wyman to Barrowton. According to Wyman, the Freys grew impatient with the pace his leader was traveling and were anxious to reunite with their kin. In their haste, they set out on their own. As it would turn out, they were never seen or heard from again. Once the leader arrived at Barrowton, a search party went out and looked for 16 days, but found no trace of the missing Freys. Fast forward to the wedding feast at Winterfell. Lord Wyman furnished the food and drink. Lord Wyman also served the wedding pie directly to Roose, Fat Walda, Sir Hoster, and Sir Aenys while telling them, "This is the best pie you have ever tasted, my lords. Wash it down with arbor gold and savor every bite. I know I shall." And indeed he did, because Lord Wyman ate 6 slices of the Frey pie that day. And so it would seem that the taste of vengeance was not too sweet. In my estimation, the Pink Letter is just another example of the subterfuge that Lord Wyman was already engaging in. We can see how Lord Wyman would benefit from Jon's presence at Winterfell by examining Wyman's motives to bring Rickon to Winterfell. Roose Bolton claims to have Eddard Stark's daughter. To thwart him, Lord Wyman must have Eddard Stark's son in the son's direwolf. The wolf would prove Rickon's identity should the Boltons attempt to deny him. Now, if one of Eddard Stark's sons and his wolf could thwart the Boltons, what could two do? Especially if one of those sons was the son who looks most like Ned. If anyone was still skeptical to revolt with just Rickon, Jon and Ghost would give the other northern houses the push they need. There is another detail we should consider when figuring out who authored the Pink Letter. The author of the Pink Letter claimed that the false king's friends were dead and that their heads were upon the walls of Winterfell. I take issue with this detail because Ramsay skins his captives and displays the flayed body as a whole. So displaying a non-flayed head by itself isn't consistent for Ramsay. For the author to get this detail wrong is a big deal. How does this pertain to Wyman Manderley? That's tricky. Lord Wyman himself mounts and displays heads as he did to who he claimed was Davos. So one might say if he authored the Pink Letter, he injected personal details that were familiar to him. But this doesn't add up because we know that Lord Wyman knows exactly what Ramsay does with people he kills. Remember, Lord Wyman is the one who told Davos about what Ramsay does to the women he hunts. So it would seem we are at an impasse. But there is an additional possibility that could explain this erroneous detail. What if this detail was not referring to the Spearwives? What if these friends are friends within Winterfell's walls that Stannis doesn't know he has? Confused? I'd be surprised if you weren't. But hear me out. There aren't human heads on the walls of Winterfell, but there are heads made of snow. Specifically, there are snowmen on the battlements of Winterfell. While roaming the grounds, Theon notes that some squires were building snowmen along the battlements. The squires were arming the snowmen with spears and shields, topped them with iron half-helms, and were arraying them along Winterfell's inner wall, which stands 100 feet high. Theon thinks of them as a rank of snowy sentinels. Some hours later, Theon passes the same spot and notices that more snowmen had been built. To lead the sentinels, the squires put up 12 more snowmen who were to be the lords. One was obviously Wyman Manderley, one was Harwood Stout. Another was Lady Barbara Dustin, and one was plainly Horsebane Umber. As I've already demonstrated, Wyman Manderley is 100% anti-Bolton and Frey and is scheming extensively to thwart them. So he would be a friend to Jon and Stannis. But what about the other noted lords and ladies that were represented with snowmen? Harwood Stout is a vassal of Lady Barbara, so as she goes, he goes. Lady Barbara openly displays extreme contempt for House Stark, but to me it seems as though it's just an act. Before Ramsay's wedding, Lady Barbara insisted that she have custody of Arya until the ceremony. Given that Barbara barred Ramsay from her castle, keeping faux Arya in her custody was Barbara's way of protecting her. If she truly hated House Stark, she wouldn't give a shit if Ned's daughter was safe or not. Barbara also has equal cause to hate the Boltons and Freys. Not only did she lose men at the Red Wedding, but she thinks Ramsay murdered her nephew, his half-brother Domeric. Lady Barbara had no children, so she had a very close relationship with Domeric. So, certainly she would be a friend to Stannis. Horsebane Umber is only aligned with the Boltons because the Freys have Great John Umber as hostage back at the Twins. Considering they too suffered heavy losses at the Red Wedding, he would be a friend to anyone willing to end the Boltons' tenure. Theon also notes during a meal that Hothor Umber and Harwood Stout were talking quietly amongst themselves. Could it be that Stout was Lady Barbara's means of communicating with Umber? Is it possible that there's a secret alliance between Wyman, Barbara, Harwood, and Hothor? I think so. Lastly, if we look at how the snowmen were displayed, it suggests that there was clear intent in the scene. The squires armed the snowmen with real weaponry. Part of a squire's duties are to care for their knight's equipment. Now, no knight would allow equipment to be wasted like this, especially not on the eve of battle. The only way that the squires could do this is if they were given orders. It's also worth noting that the snowmen were displayed in such a way that there were distinct soldiers and distinct lords. This too could be a message. We know from various characters like Sir Barristan and Bowen Marsh that there are ways to estimate the size of an army based off visual cues. Both Stannis and Jon would know how to do these sorts of counts, so it's certainly possible that the squires were instructed to build the snowmen to reflect how many men each lord has in their camp. So, as crazy as this sounds, it's highly likely that there's more to these frosty fellows than meets the eye, and that Wyman Manderley included them in the pink letter as the false king's friends. If we continue examining Lord Wyman's behavior at the wedding feast, it's pretty clear that he knows this aria is Fugazi. At the feast, he requests the singer sing of Danny Flint. Danny Flint was a girl who dressed up as a boy so she could join the Night's Watch. Once discovered, she was raped and killed, but she is remembered for being brave and young. That Lord Wyman requests this song suggests he knows that this whole thing is a scam. Now, if Jon turned up at Winterfell, he could help Lord Wyman in a way that Rickon can't. Jon is older than Arya, so he could verify that this girl who's Ramsay's wife is not truly Arya. He would also know that this girl is Jane Poole. Jane was Sansa Stark's best friend and grew up at Winterfell with Jon, so he would know exactly who she is, and the Northern Lords would have no cause to doubt him. In a way, Jon would actually be of more use than Rickon because he could expose the Boltons as frauds. Realizing that they've been scammed would surely turn all the northern houses against the Boltons, which would in turn lead to their downfall. Lord Wyman couldn't ask for anything better. Lord Wyman's behavior at the wedding feast is the gift that keeps on giving. While deep in his cups, Lord Wyman requests another song that makes me raise an eyebrow. "Give us the night that ended, singer," he bellowed. "The bride will like that one, I know." Now, if you didn't know, The Night That Ended is a song sung in the North. There is a stanza that has the Night's Watch riding out to meet the others in the battle for the dawn. The Boltons are far from others, but they certainly would be considered monstrous by those they rule over. So, I raise an eyebrow to ask, did Lord Wyman request this song because he suspected that there is an army marching south, led by the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, to fight the Boltons and end their reign of terror? The only reason Lord Manderley would suspect that this army is coming is if he'd written the pink letter to lure Jon to Winterfell. There are 3 more details I'd like to talk about as it pertains to Wyman Manderley writing the pink letter. First, the author of the pink letter emphasizes that Stannis is a false king. In fact, the author never uses Stannis' name. They call him false king 4 times. An exchange during A Dance with Dragons between Davos and Wyman Manderley hints at Wyman's attitude towards Stannis. Davos says, "If it is justice that you want, my lord, look to King Stannis. No man is more just." Robert Glover injected, "Your loyalty does you honor, my lord, but Stannis Baratheon remains your king, not our own." "Your own king is dead," Davos reminded them, "murdered at the Red Wedding beside Lord Wyman's son." "The young wolf is dead," Manderley allowed, "but that brave boy was not Lord Eddard's only son." So it's pretty clear that if your last name isn't Stark, you will never be a true king in Wyman Manderley's eyes. The second detail is that White Harbor favors the Seven over the Lord of Light. The letter refers to Melisandre as a red whore and a red witch, and claims that Stannis was defeated in 7 days of battle. That the author chose 7 days over any other number is no accident. This was the author's way of elevating the faith of the Seven over R'hllor. I believe a conversation between Lady Leona, Wyman's daughter-in-law, and Davos showcases White Harbor's attitude towards Melisandre. Lady Leona calls Melisandre a red witch and says that Mel would turn them against the Seven to bow before a fire demon. Now, did you catch that? She used the phrase red witch. This is the exact same phrase used by the author of the pink letter. Remember, in the 4th stanza of the letter, the author said, "I want his daughter and I want his red witch." Now, not only does Lady Leona's contempt for Melisandre match the contempt expressed for Mel in the pink letter, but her verbiage matches too. If this isn't an indictment that Wyman Manderley either wrote the pink letter himself or had one of his people write it using his words, I don't know what is. Third and finally, Wyman Manderley has been at Barrowton and at Winterfell. Theon Greyjoy has been at both places as well, so Wyman would know all about Reek and his stink. Now, in the spirit of transparency, I think it's only fair that we look at the reasons why Lord Wyman did not write the pink letter. First, he never refers to Jon as a bastard, but the author of the pink letter does 4 times. If Wyman had wrote this, why would he change that? Being called bastard isn't what makes Jon decide to leave the wall. It's the threat of murder from Ramsay that sways him. So Wyman wouldn't need to use a new word he doesn't readily use in his speech to get what he wanted from Jon. Second, Lord Wyman would have no way to know about Melisandre's schemes with Mance, that Mel burned someone in his place, that she sent him to recover Jon's sister, and how many spearwives Mance brought with him. Now, you might think that Mance told Lord Manderley about his plans. In a way, that makes sense, because Lord Wyman pretended to kill someone but secretly sent that person on a mission to get a Stark child. This is exactly what Melisandre is doing. Mance is to Mel what Davos is to Wyman, so seemingly Lord Wyman could be trusted. But in a bigger way, this doesn't make sense. As far as Mance knows, Melisandre and Jon have his son. Melisandre will burn anyone and everyone without batting an eyelash. So why would Mance gamble on his baby's life like that? Pissing off Mel by deviating from her plan would likely mean the death of his son. Third, Wyman wouldn't know about Val or about Mance's son. Again, you could assume that Mance might have told Lord Manderley about them, and again, I'd ask you, why on earth would Mance do that? It makes no sense. Even if Mance had told Wyman about his stuff with Melisandre, why would he bring up Val or his son? It's got absolutely nothing to do with them. Fourth, if Lord Wyman wanted to gather Ned's sons at Winterfell, he'd have reason to write a letter to lure Jon from the wall, but he'd have to know the penalty for Jon leaving. Desertion would get Jon killed. Either his Watch brothers would get him before he left the wall, which is exactly what happened, or the Watch would send a raven to the Boltons to inform them that Jon was coming. As Wardens of the North, it would fall to the Boltons to dispense the king's justice. So either way, Jon wouldn't make it to Winterfell alive, and that would defeat the purpose of Wyman writing the letter in the first place. So, if Lord Wyman could accomplish his goal with Rickon, and there wouldn't be any danger to Rickon leaving his current location, then it makes sense that Wyman would stick with Rickon versus hedging his bets by bringing Jon into the equation. So there you have it, a look at Wyman Manderley in the pink letter. In my assessment, I think it's highly likely that Lord Wyman wrote the pink letter. However, I think there's someone who is equally, if not more likely, to have written the pink letter for a completely different reason. In my next video, I will be covering who this person is and why she wrote the pink letter. That will be the 4th and final in this installment. So, be on the lookout for that. I am Ashley of Noth. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit like, subscribe as usual. Huge shout out to Jim Young, Cameo, Lady Olenna Tyrell, and Lady De Winter. Without your guys' support, this channel would not be here. Thank you. And last but not least, 7 blessings, friends.